In September 1940, a Polish resistance fighter named Witold Pilecki did something that no sane person would ever do. He deliberately got himself arrested by the Nazis and sent to Auschwitz. He was not suicidal. He was not confused. He knew exactly what Auschwitz was, and he went there anyway on purpose, as part of a mission so dangerous that his own commanders tried to talk him out of it. His goal was to gather intelligence about the camp, organize a resistance movement among the prisoners, and prepare for a possible uprising. He would spend nearly 3 years inside the most notorious death camp in human history, watching thousands of people die while secretly building a network that smuggled information to the outside world. When he finally escaped in 1943, he brought with him the first comprehensive eyewitness report of the Holocaust. But he told the Allies exactly what was happening in Auschwitz. He described the gas chambers, the mass executions, the industrial scale of the killing. Almost no one believed him. This is the story of Witold Pilecki, the man who volunteered for Auschwitz and lived to tell the world what he saw. Witold Pilecki was born in 1901 in what was then part of the Russian Empire. He grew up during a time of war and revolution. As a young man, he fought in the Polish-Soviet War of 1920, helping to defend the newly independent Poland from Bolshevik invasion. Between the wars, Pilecki lived the life of a Polish gentleman farmer. He married, had 2 children, and seemed destined for a quiet existence in the countryside. But when Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, Pilecki's quiet life ended forever. He fought in the September campaign against the German invasion. When Poland fell, he did not surrender. Instead, he helped found one of the first resistance organizations in occupied Europe, the secret Polish Army. He was 40 years old, a father of 2, and he was about to become one of the most remarkable spies in history. By 1940, rumors were spreading through occupied Poland about a new German camp near the town of Auschwitz. The Germans called it Auschwitz. Poles who were sent there did not come back. No one knew exactly what was happening inside, but everyone knew it was terrible. The Polish resistance needed intelligence. They needed to know what the Germans were doing in Auschwitz. They needed someone to go inside, observe, and report back. Pilecki volunteered. His commanders were stunned. The mission was essentially a death sentence. Even if Pilecki survived the initial imprisonment, how would he gather intelligence? How would he communicate with the outside world? How would he ever escape? Pilecki had answers for all of these questions. He had a plan. It was dangerous, complicated, and required incredible luck. But he believed it could work. On September 19, 1940, Pilecki deliberately walked into a German street roundup in Warsaw. He was arrested along with nearly 2,000 other Polish men and transported to Auschwitz. He entered the camp as prisoner number 4,859. What Pilecki found in Auschwitz was worse than anything he had imagined. The camp in 1940 was not yet the industrialized death factory it would later become. The gas chambers and crematoria had not yet been built. But it was already a place of systematic brutality, starvation, and murder. Prisoners were beaten for no reason. They were worked until they collapsed. They were shot for looking at a guard the wrong way. The mortality rate was staggering. Men who arrived healthy were dead within weeks. Pilecki watched prisoners die every day. He saw men beaten to death with clubs. He saw men shot for sport. He saw men starve because the food rations were deliberately designed to kill slowly. He recorded everything in his memory, building the report he would eventually deliver to the outside world. But observation was only part of his mission. Pilecki also began building a resistance organization inside the camp. This was almost impossibly dangerous. The Germans had informers everywhere. Any hint of organized resistance meant immediate execution. So Pilecki had to identify trustworthy prisoners, recruit them one by one, and create a network that could communicate, gather intelligence, and potentially fight back. He called his organization the Union of Military Organizations. It started with a handful of men and eventually grew to include hundreds of prisoners organized into cells. Each cell knew only a few other members, so that if one cell was discovered, the others would survive. The network accomplished remarkable things. They smuggled medicine to sick prisoners. They arranged for certain prisoners to be assigned to less deadly work details. They gathered intelligence about camp operations, guard schedules, and German military movements. Most importantly, they found ways to communicate with the outside world. Pilecki's network smuggled written reports out of Auschwitz through a variety of ingenious methods. Some reports were hidden in laundry sent to be cleaned outside the camp. Others were carried by prisoners who were released or transferred. Some were memorized and delivered verbally by escaped prisoners. These reports were the first detailed accounts of what was happening in Auschwitz to reach the Polish resistance and, through them, the Allied governments. Pilecki described the conditions in the camp with brutal precision. He documented the deliberate starvation, the random executions, the medical experiments. As the camp evolved into a center for the extermination of Jews, Pilecki reported on the gas chambers and the crematoria. He provided estimates of how many people were being killed and how. The reports were sent to London, where the Polish government in exile passed them to British and American intelligence. For the first time, the Allies had detailed eyewitness testimony about the Holocaust. They did almost nothing with it. Allied leaders found Pilecki's reports difficult to believe. The scale of the killing seemed impossible. Surely the Germans, however brutal, would not construct factories designed solely to murder millions of people. The reports must be exaggerated. They must be propaganda. Pilecki's intelligence was filed away and largely ignored. The death camps continued to operate. The killing continued to accelerate. By the time the Allies finally accepted the truth about Auschwitz, millions more had died. Inside the camp, Pilecki continued his work. He organized the resistance, gathered intelligence, and waited for an opportunity that never came. And Pilecki had hoped that the Polish resistance or the Allies would attack Auschwitz from outside. His network inside the camp was prepared to support such an attack. They had identified weak points in the defenses. They had hidden weapons. They were ready to fight. But the attack never came. The Allies decided that liberating concentration camps was not a military priority. The resources needed for such an operation were better used elsewhere. The prisoners of Auschwitz would have to wait for the general defeat of Germany. By 1943, Pilecki realized that no rescue was coming. His network had been partially compromised. Several members had been discovered and executed. The Gestapo was getting closer to identifying him as the leader of the camp resistance. He decided to escape. On the night of April 26, 1943, Pilecki and two other prisoners made their move. They were assigned to a bakery outside the main camp perimeter. They overpowered a guard, cut through a fence, and ran into the darkness. The Germans pursued them with dogs and searchlights. Pilecki and his companions ran through the night, hiding in fields and forests. Against all odds, they made it to safety. Pilecki had spent 2 years and 7 months inside Auschwitz. He was one of the few people ever to enter the camp voluntarily and leave it alive. After his escape, Pilecki wrote a detailed report on everything he had witnessed. The report, known as the Pilecki Report, was over 100 pages long. It described the organization of the camp, the methods of killing, the numbers of victims, and the resistance activities he had organized. The report was sent to the Allies. Once again, it was largely ignored. Pilecki did not give up. He continued to fight in the Polish resistance, participating in the Warsaw Uprising of 1944. When the uprising failed and the Germans destroyed Warsaw in retaliation, Pilecki was captured and spent the rest of the war in a German prisoner of war camp. He survived the war. But his story does not have a happy ending. When the war ended, Poland fell under Soviet domination. The new communist government viewed the Polish resistance as a threat. Men who had fought against the Germans were now enemies of the state because they had also fought for an independent Poland that the Soviets did not want to exist. Pilecki could have fled to the West. Many of his fellow resistance fighters did exactly that. But Pilecki chose to stay in Poland. He believed he could continue to serve his country even under communist rule. He was wrong. In 1947, Pilecki was arrested by the Polish Communist Secret Police. He was accused of spying for Western intelligence and plotting against the state. The charges were absurd. The evidence was fabricated. The trial was a show trial designed to eliminate a hero who represented everything the communists wanted to destroy. Pilecki was tortured during his interrogation. He later said that Auschwitz was nothing compared to what the communists did to him. Despite the torture, he refused to implicate his fellow resistance fighters. He protected his comrades to the end. On May 25, 1948, Witold Pilecki was executed with a single shot to the back of the head. He was 47 years old. His body was buried in an unmarked grave, and for decades his name was erased from Polish history. The communist government could not allow Poles to remember a hero who had fought for freedom against both Nazis and Soviets. Pilecki became a non-person, mentioned in no textbooks, honored with no monuments. It was not until the fall of communism in 1989 that Poland began to reclaim Pilecki's memory. His story was finally told. His reports were finally published. His sacrifice was finally recognized. Today, Witold Pilecki is considered one of the greatest heroes in Polish history. Streets and schools bear his name. Monuments stand in his honor. His story is taught to Polish children as an example of courage that defies comprehension. But outside Poland, Pilecki remains largely unknown. His name does not appear in most histories of World War II. His incredible mission to Auschwitz is rarely mentioned. The man who volunteered for hell and lived to tell the world about it has been forgotten by the world he tried to save. Perhaps this is because Pilecki's story is uncomfortable. It reminds us that the Allies knew about the Holocaust and did little to stop it. It reminds us that heroes are not always rewarded. It reminds us that the end of one tyranny can simply mean the beginning of another. Pilecki's life asked difficult questions. What would you do if you knew about a great evil and no one would listen? How far would you go to fight injustice? What would you sacrifice for the truth? Witold Pilecki answered those questions with his life. He walked into Auschwitz knowing he might never walk out. He told the world what he saw, knowing he might not be believed. He stayed in Poland knowing he might be killed. At every turning point, he chose the harder path, the more dangerous option, the course that required the most courage. He was not a perfect man. He was not a saint. He was a soldier who did his duty as he understood it, even when his duty required him to do the impossible. The world did not listen to Witold Pilecki when he was alive. Perhaps we can listen to him now. His message was simple. Evil exists. It must be witnessed. It must be reported. It must be resisted, even when resistance seems hopeless, even when no one believes you, even when the cost is everything you have. Witold Pilecki paid that cost. The least we can do is remember his name. In 2006, Pilecki was posthumously awarded the Order of the White Eagle, Poland's highest decoration. In 2013, he was promoted to the rank of colonel, 65 years after his execution. These honors came too late to matter to Pilecki himself, but they mattered to his children, who had lived for decades with the knowledge that their father was officially considered a traitor. His daughter, Zofia Pilecka-Optulewicz, spent years fighting to rehabilitate her father's name. She collected documents, gave interviews, and refused to let the world forget what he had done. When Poland finally acknowledged Pilecki as a hero, she said it was the happiest day of her life. Pilecki's original reports from Auschwitz are now preserved in Polish archives. They are chilling documents, written in the calm, precise language of a military intelligence officer, describing horrors that defy description. Reading them today, when knowing that they were written inside the camp itself, is an almost unbearable experience. One passage stands out. Pilecki wrote that he had seen things that no human being should ever have to see, but he also wrote that he did not regret his decision to enter Auschwitz. He had done what needed to be done. He had witnessed evil so that others would know it existed. He had resisted so that others would know resistance was possible. That is the legacy of Witold Pilecki. Not just courage, but purpose. Not just sacrifice, but meaning. He went into the darkness so that light could follow. The story of Witold Pilecki should be known by everyone. It should be taught in schools alongside the stories of other resistance heroes. It should remind us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose courage over comfort, duty over safety, truth over silence. Auschwitz is now a museum. Millions of people visit every year to see the place where over 1 million human beings were murdered. They walk through the gates beneath the infamous sign that reads, Arbeit macht frei. Work sets you free. They see the barracks, the gas chambers, the piles of shoes and eyeglasses taken from the dead. But few of them know that a man once walked through those gates voluntarily. A man who could have stayed safe but chose to bear witness. A man who could have remained silent but chose to speak. A man named Witold Pilecki. If you want to hear more stories like this, consider subscribing to the channel. We uncover the untold stories of World War II, the ones that history books left out. See you in the next video.